tears. Now, once in a while, we will be stricken with something that we've done, and I don't know, we respond in some way, but have any of us? I don't know of anybody, and I certainly haven't. Now, that's not an endorsement of being cavalier about it, but this woman knew her sin, and she was very, if you will, sorry for, and was demonstrating that to Christ. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. I mean, this wasn't just a... Now, I watch programs on TV, and when it's a little kid or something, I can get a tear. I don't want Helen to see it, but anyway, but there ain't nothing I'm going to wet with my tears. I mean, it just boggles my mind that you could be that openly. But in the society that we're talking about here, they were a whole lot more emotional than we're used to be. A whole lot more emotional. And so people cried at funerals. They would have people paid to cry and so forth. So it's a different thing we're used to. But this lady was literally crying at Jesus' feet so much that her tears were dripping on his feet. Now, we'll get to this a little later perhaps, but let me say that his feet were probably dirty. And when the tears were dropping on his feet, it was probably, you could see a little mud collecting. Now, this is, you got to be an imagination, because if your feet are dusty and they get a little drops of water on them, why, it should be cleaned up. And she was probably seeing that and wiping his dirty feet, if you will, with her hair. And kissing them. Kissed them and poured perfume on them, on his feet. I cannot imagine me sitting at a table with my feet stuck out. The dog manages to get up in my lap every now and then and wants to lick my face. And if he's chewing on my shoes or my toe, I'm noticing it and don't like it. I don't like anything messing with my feet. Jesus was putting up with this. I think it's interesting for her to be at his feet. Now, he's apparently talking to others around the table and got other things on his mind, but somebody's sitting there wetting his feet, wiping it with hair, and pouring perfume on it. Now, that's kind of the picture, if you will. But when the Pharisee who had invited Christ, saw this, he said to himself, now remember, this is to himself, if this man were a prophet. Now, the Pharisees all along was objecting to Christ, and he was not following their religion, if you will, their procedures that they had created over time. And so they had a problem. This Pharisee probably had a problem. It's very possible he invited him to trap him. It doesn't say. And we'll see later on that he didn't treat him like he should have. But when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of a woman she is, that she is a sinner. If you were a holy man, you wouldn't let anybody that was a sinner touch you. We all know that if you're contaminated in some way, you touch something and it becomes contaminated. If you're pure and touch something, it doesn't become pure. We know that. But in this case, a holy man of the day would not have allowed anybody sinful like that they knew of to touch them even. Not to even touch him. So he said this could not be a prophet, because he doesn't know that she's a sinner. If you were a prophet, you would know what kind of a person that was. I think it's interesting. Most of us like to think that we can listen to somebody for a while and tell exactly what kind of a person they are, but we're wrong. That can't happen. Nor, now, Jesus knew what kind of a woman she was, but prophets didn't, because of that, know that. But at any rate, now Christ is going to prove to him that he's a prophet. I think it went over his head, but he's going to prove to him. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. And I'm not sure, in my mind, this is probably a sarcastic response. Well, tell me, teacher. He said, now you can take that and read it any way you want to. I think it's interesting. In our written language, we don't get a lot of the story. When somebody talks to you, you can say that in a number of different ways. It tells a different story. Tell me, teacher, would be one way. And tell me, teacher, would be another way. All those things mean something different. But the written word says, tell me, teacher. And I think it's probably sarcastic because the Pharisees were fighting Christ on what he was teaching, if you will. But Christ says 2 men owed money to a certain money lender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Now, one denarii is a day's wages. So understand, this one was over a year's wages. And the one that owned a little was almost 2 months' wages. So you can multiply that by the money you make today and give a sense of what it is. But 2 men owed money to a certain money lender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back. So he canceled the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Now, my immediate thought is, well, the one that appreciated it the most. But and this is another thing where Simon, this is where we find out the Pharisee's name. Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt canceled. Now, let me suggest that if this Pharisee had invited Christ to his party, if you will, to dinner to try to trap him, which the Pharisees had been doing, then he was probably aware of that. Maybe he's thinking, well, Christ's going to try to trap me. So he didn't want to make a flat statement. Well, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt canceled. And I'm sure this made him feel better. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. So he encouraged him, if you will. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet. Now let me explain that it was common courtesy, just common courtesy, when you had guests to wash their feet when they came in, because they figured they were clean, but as they was walking along dusty roads in their sandals, their feet got dirty. So they'd wash their feet and they were completely clean. And we know that the lowest servant of the household had the duty of cleaning guests' feet. They would wash their feet. So he didn't even give Jesus the common courtesy of a guest. So you can see there was not a friendly welcome here. It reminds me in our current day, we'd certainly come up with examples of it, but if you keep up with the news, this week the White House invited the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House and snubbed him, did not treat him the way the head of a Israel or any other country should have been treated. And it hit the news big time. I'm sure he did it on purpose because he doesn't like what Israel is doing, Netanyahu is doing. But it's very similar to here. He was not treated as, this is Christ, was not treated as a normal guest should have been. So he says, when I came to your house, you did not give me any water for my feet. But she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. Absolutely a humble thing to do. You would not do that. Even the lowest servant in the household didn't want to do it, but somebody had to do it, and they were assigned, so they didn't have a choice. You did not give me a kiss.